Welcome back. Listen Up is taking a deeper look at Afghanistan and the people who serve the country best. Ricky Ratliff brings us this report.
With this lineup, you'd think a celebrity had come to town. But most celebrities don't make public appearances at libraries. For this Nobel Peace Prize nominee, the Toronto Public Library was the perfect location to promote his latest book and an unconventional message.
There is no military solution in Afghanistan.
A bold statement from a man who once served in the U.S. military himself. 30 years and over 130 schools later, Greg's mission has changed.
We have to quit building walls. We have to start building bridges. I definitely think that there can be peace and hope, but it's going to take a long time, maybe 10 or 20 years. And the real hope for peace, I think, is with our children in both countries.
In 1993, Greg began building schools in remote regions of Pakistan and Afghanistan. But it has come at a cost. Once held at gunpoint by a tribe associated with the Taliban, Greg has seen the enemy up close. But he believes the real enemy is ignorance.
And it's ignorance that breeds hatred. And to overcome ignorance, we have to have compassion. We need courage. And most of all, I think it's based in education.
Courage indeed. Since 2007, the Taliban has bombed, destroyed, and shut down nearly 2,000 schools in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Greg says 90% of those schools destroyed were built for girls.
Why are they so terrified of little girls going to school? Because I think their greatest fear, it's not a bullet, but it's a pen. And what they fear the most, if that girl goes to school, gets her education, the value of education goes on in the community, and they've lost a way to get ideologically to control society. One of the things that we do in Afghanistan in the last 3 years is we've hired former Taliban to teach in our schools. Those guys have become our greatest advocates for education.
Trading weapons for books is an idea that's catching on. Greg's best-selling novel, 3 Cups of Tea, is now mandatory reading for all senior military commanders and all special forces deploying to Afghanistan.
The military in Canada and the U.S., they really get it. Many of our soldiers have been deployed in Afghanistan 3 or 4 times. And from the top down, one of the top priorities in the military now is to build relationships, to listen.
For this humanitarian, the solution seems simple.
What we really all need to do, I think, is have more tea. Also, diplomacy, half of diplomacy is just showing up. You don't have to agree. You don't have to have any consensus. You don't have to have any plan. You just have to show up, have some tea, and start talking, debating.
But peace through diplomacy alone is not everyone's cup of tea. This Canadian soldier maintains his own unconventional case for how to arrive at peace for Afghanistan.
Well, I think that peace is actually a direct result of conflict. Any kind of peace that you would have, there's obviously some sort of a struggle that you have to go through first, right? And looking at it from sort of the Christian perspective, yeah, peace is achievable. However, there is that struggle that is required first.
As a Christian and a soldier, Major Joe Nanato knows the battle between the two realities well. And he understands conflict, having served on a psychological operation in Afghanistan for 7 months. His mission, to get into the mind of the enemy. But tonight, he's leading a company of Canadian forces at the Fort York Armory in Toronto. Major Nanato's company sections are competing for top section and basic soldier skills. Skills that will come in handy on a battlefield. And although danger may seem a far cry for them now, competing under a warm armory and a tranquil night sky, Major Nanato has profound respect for the men and women who volunteer to put on the uniform of the Canadian Forces.
They're giving up all sorts of things just to be able to serve overseas, to serve another people, right? To serve our country, but with the whole aim of making another country better.
What are some of the most poignant sacrifices you've seen from your fellow soldiers in Afghanistan?
Well, obviously, when you're there, you see the sacrifice of separation, right? You go into the phone booths and you see husbands or even wives crying because they're talking to their children or their spouses. And you can see that the children, and sometimes people go on leave and they come back and they say, well, what was the hardest thing about going home? Was actually seeing their children and then watching their children's hearts break again when they had to jump back on the plane and leave.
What goes through your heart and your mind when you see such a concrete example of Canadian sacrifice travel down that stretch of Highway of Heroes?
Number one, you get that pride because Canada, the Canadian people are touching back out to its Canadian forces. And so you feel that your heart is touched. But then you also feel sorry for that soldier that has given up his life, and then the family that'll never be the same again. And so you say a prayer for him, but also it kind of spurs you on to, like, you want to continue on, you want to sort of jump back into the fray and help out. Like, there are so many of my own soldiers who are in my company, I must say, that very courageously volunteer again, and they just got back. And I think it's the reason for it is something of a bit of realizing that there's a sacrifice there, seeing that it's noble, and wanting to get back into it because they can, and they realize that you really are fighting for your brother or sister that's over there, the person that's next to you.
Canada's sons and daughters answering the call of duty. Reporting from the Royal Regiment of Canada at the historic Fort York Armory, for Listen Up TV, I'm Ricky Ratliff. When Listen Up returns, what does it take for a mother to send her child into a war zone? What does it take for a soldier to go? We'll find out.
When you get word that your child is going to Afghanistan, that's where the rubber meets the road.